Hi, my name's Paul Grogan and welcome to another Gaming Rules Review. In this video I'm going to be telling you what I think about Cooper Island, designed by Andreas Odendahl, or Oda, published by Frosted Games and Capstone Games, 2 to 4 players, Euro style game. This is what I think about it. But before that, just wanted to say a big thank you to all of my Patreon supporters who make these kind of videos possible, and this game is one of the ones that my Patreon supporters voted on as they wanted me to do a review of. So if you like the content that I make and you want to be in with voting on which games I'm going to review next month, then please consider supporting me over at patreon.com. Anyway, on with the game. So what I think about this game? Well, for those people who follow me on social media, you already know that this is one of my favourite games of 2019. I think the game is absolutely fantastic. I'm going to spend this video trying to tell you, or trying to explain why I think it's good, and also taking a critical look at a couple of things in it. Before I jump into what I think about it, what is the game about? I've mentioned it's 2 to 4 players, and it's basically set on Cooper Island. And each player has their own peninsula of Cooper Island, and will be placing workers on the main board here in order to take various actions, which will involve placing tiles onto their own peninsula, building up, which is representing cultivating the land, gaining resources, which are then used to, you can buy boats, which will give you extra income. You can build these buildings and put them on the board, which will give you special abilities. You can get extra workers. You can accomplish certain achievements on your own player board. There are boats here requiring goods, so you can deliver to the boats to get bonuses there. But a lot of what you're trying to do in the game gives you these helm points. And every time you get a helm point, you can move your ship one space around the board. And you basically move, this is set up for a 3-player game. Every sandbank is a space. So you move 1 would be to there, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. 5 would be to there, and then 6 would be to there, and 7. And you actually go around the board. And every movement point is effectively 1 victory point, because at the end of the game, you add up how far your ship has moved, and that is going to be your main source of victory points. So it's interesting that the movement, effectively the score track, is the boat's movement. I mean, you got 2 boats, and you count those. So if this one's moved 11 spaces and this one's moved 6 spaces, you'll get 16 points at the end of the game, plus some extra bonus points from other places. But your points are mainly going to come from moving your ship. And this is a game where every point matters. You will be winning this game when you first play it with probably about 20 points. And if you play really badly, you'll probably end up with, maybe even less than 10 points or 12 or something like that. So, like in a lot of Euro games where, you'll score 150 or 200 points or whatever. In this game, you are going to be scoring a low amount of points. So just be aware of that when you're going into the game, that every bit matters. So I've already mentioned that why I like this game. Why do I like this game? The crunchy decisions that you have to make in this game are very, very good. And I really enjoy that mental challenge of trying to work out, effectively, you've got your own player board is a puzzle. Because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be building up, and I'm going to show some still images on screen at this point, you're going to be building up your own peninsula, and you're going to be placing tiles on it, and the tiles will be going higher and higher, and the higher the tile is, the more the resources on it are worth. So if you've got, a cloth resource at height 4, that's actually representing 4 cloth. And there are certain rules that you have to follow when you're building up your peninsula that I'm not going to go into here, but it's very clever and it's a little puzzle, and I'm glad that the game has no player interaction in that particular area. There is in other areas, very minor, but in that particular area, it's your own puzzle to try and work out what you're going to do. There's lots of different things you can do in the game. As I mentioned, you can build these buildings, you can renovate, you can excavate and then renovate these statues. You can get these boats for extra income, but you don't have to do any of that. Well, you probably want to do some of it. There's so many different things you can do in this game. You're not going to be able to do everything. It's a worker placement game. You start with 2 workers, these normal workers here. You can get extra workers as the game goes on, but every extra worker you get means you've got to feed them. But getting the extra workers is actually really hard. To do so, you have to complete at least one of these achievements. As soon as you do, you can gain an extra worker. And completing the achievements, they're actually quite hard to do. I think I have seen it done in round 1, maybe, but maybe round 2. You're probably going to do it in your first game in round 3 or 4. And that's 3 or 4 in a 5-round game. You're not going to be accomplishing, or it doesn't feel like you're going to be accomplishing very much in this game, because you start off with 2 workers, 5 rounds, that's 10 actions. You're probably going to get a 3rd worker, maybe a 4th one. But then your extra workers goes to these cards here that are end game scoring cards. So you're not going to be taking that many main actions in the game. So the game is quite heavy, and it's heavy in a couple of different ways. The first way is the rules. There's a lot of rules. This is a complex game. A full teach is probably going to take you about 45 minutes. I have done a tutorial and playthrough video, which I think the teach in that was about 50 minutes. So yeah, that's the amount of time it's going to take you to explain all of the rules of the game. It is quite heavy. If you look at these 8 actions here, the iconography, once you get used to it, is really good. The iconography is fantastic in this game. I'm going to mention that more later on. But once you've got your head around these 8 actions, these are all relatively simple. That's not where the complexity comes in. The complexity comes in. If you just look at your player board for a minute, check that out. It's absolutely covered in icons. Now, if that absolutely scares you away, then this is probably not the kind of game for you. As I say, this is a complex game, but the iconography is extremely good. And once you know the rules of the game, everything is on here. And it's all extremely clear. It's very, very visually, it indicates very well visually exactly what's going on, what you need to do in the game. But yeah, there's a lot of rules in there. But the depth comes into all of the player choices. So on your turn, you will place a worker onto one of the spaces on the board. You can use a space occupied by somebody else if you pay them and the stuff like that, and you'll perform one of the 8 actions. Seems simple enough. But there are these things called anytime actions. And on your player board, all of these purple things here and here are anytime actions. And you can combo so many things together that your turn can actually be fairly complex, because you can do the anytime actions, as it says, at any time, and it's using them in combination with your main actions, and you've got a logistics problem as well. The game is extremely tight. First of all, it's tight in terms of resources and money. You're not going to have many more than you need. You're going to be really, really short on resources, but also you have limited space to store those resources. So it is a logistical challenge. If you need 8 cloth, how are you going to get 8 cloth when you've only got space for 5 of them? Well, as I mentioned earlier on, the cubes on your peninsula, the higher they are up, the more they are worth. But yes, you do have a puzzle on your peninsula. You've got a puzzle on your player board, trying to make the most efficient use of your actions in order to try and score the most points you can. The play time on the box, well, it says 60 to 120 minutes. So that's for 2 to 4 players. What it's saying is 30 minutes per player, which is doable if you all know what you're doing and you play relatively quick. Double that for your first game. I think, yeah, maybe not double it, but you know, your first game is going to run longer as people are going to need to think about it, ask questions again. But one of the reasons why I like about this game, I've mentioned that I like the crunchy decisions. There is a lot going on in this game, and I can play a full game of this now, 4-player, in probably about just under 3 hours, maybe 2.5, 2 3/4 hours, probably 2.5 actually. And the amount of, at the end of that game, the amount of mental exercise that my brain has gone through is a really nice amount. And then I look at the clock and I go, wow, that was only 2.5 hours. Years ago, you'd be spending 4 or 5 hours to get that same kind of reward back, in terms of if you like that amount of mental challenge. So there is a lot going on, and it does play relatively quick and relatively smoothly, and fairly quick compared to a lot of other longer games. Of course, if 2.5 to 3 hours is too long for you, and if it sounds too complex for you, then it's probably not going to be your kind of game. So I like that. Now, talking about the components of the game, no problem with any of the components whatsoever, apart from one of them. These tiles that you get, that you build up your peninsula, are really thick, and they need to be, because you are stacking these up and the height matters. So these need to be thick, and that's good. All of the components, no problems with it. The cards in the game are all fine. The only problem I did have is on these actual peninsula boards here. These are a bit thin, and I'm not sure why. I haven't asked the publisher why these were a bit thin, but that is the only gripe I have with any of the physical components in the game. That's not bad at all. Everything else is fine. And in an age where games seem to be coming out with production issues here, there, and left, right, and centre, this game doesn't have any production issues. Not in my copy anyway. If yours has, I'm sorry for that. Let's talk about the rule book. And as you know, I am fairly critical of rule books in games, and I have to say that this is probably the best rule book that I read last year. Big shout out to Victor Koblike. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Apologies, Victor, if you're watching this and it's not, or Kobilki. Kabilki probably sounds better. Anyway, Victor is down as the developer, rulebook and rulebook layout person. And he's known to me. A lot of people won't know him, but he's been involved in other games as well, where you can clearly see that he's had an involvement in it. And particularly the rulebook and the rulebook layout is him. And as I say, this is the best rulebook that I read last year. It is absolutely fantastically laid out for a complex game with lots of visual examples, lots of references. It's just so well done. I have one minor gripe that it wasn't gender neutral, but putting that aside, rules wise, amazing. On the back of it, you've got a full explanation of what everything does on your player board. It's just really good. More rule books like this, more games that Victor can be involved in, please. Thank you very much. If I was asked to be the editor of this rule book, it would be the easiest job in the world to do because it was really, really good. So yeah, all credit to the rule book. So that's the rule book covered. That's the components covered. What didn't I like about the game? Well, this is one of my favourite games from 2019. You'll have to wait until December of this year. So December 2020 is when I will be releasing my top 5 games of 2019. Yes, I will wait a year more than everybody else. But unless something changes, this is going to be in my top 5. I'm not going to say where it is in my top 5 because I don't know yet, but it is going to be in my top 5. I've currently played it, I think, 5 times. I've played it at all player counts. In fact, I said the game is 2 to 4 players. There is actually a solo pack. A downside of the game for me is the solo pack. It's just a pack of cards. I think it should have been included in the main box, to be honest. A lot of games these days are coming with a solo mode built in. So it's a little odd that they sold the solo mode as a separate pack, but it does have a solo mode, which I've played and I've done a video of that. So if you want to see me playing through that, that's on my channel now. So yeah, I've played it at all player counts. I really enjoy this game. So it is going to be very high up there. Well, as I say, it's in my top 5 of games from 2019 easily. So it's hard for me to find any downsides. If I want to start, if I forced myself and said, right, Paul, you have to say one thing negative about the game, what would it be? It would have to be that a couple of the bits seem a little bit like they're not necessary. Now, in a game which is complex with lots of little rules, there's a couple of rules in here, which I'm sure if the designer and the publisher watch this video, they say, oh my God, that rule is absolutely essential for game balance. And I get that. I get that some of the things that I'm about to mention are probably there for a very, very good reason. But when you've got a really complex game anyway, having just these extra little bits is like, okay, I know it's needed for balance, but is it really needed? So for example, there's a tiny little, well, on these two here, there is a helm point, which is basically a victory point. So that's a victory point if you use this space. It's the one thing that when I'm teaching the game, I always forget. So that's probably just me complaining because I always forget about it. But it's like, is that really needed? And the other thing as well, on your peninsula, if in phase C, which is kind of the admin-y step, if you've managed to fill all of these 3 spaces, you get a helm point. Again, I get that. It's an incentive for players to go for that, but is that really needed? Is that going to make much of a difference? So I think there might be a couple of bits in the game that possibly should have been chopped off. But again, this is if you're forcing me to find a negative about the game. I think the game's fantastic. I love it. I won't ever say no to a game of this at the moment. What I will say about, what I want to talk about now is replayability and variability. Some people associate those two things together because if you have a large amount of variability in the setup, then the games are going to be very different, and therefore that, for me, increases the replayability. Is it needed? No, because this game doesn't have much variability. Apart from the end game objectives, and in a 4-player game you always have 8 of them, in a 3-player game I'm going to pick 6 at random. Apart from those objectives and the 2 tiles that you initially get out of the bag, which again you've got options on, that's it. There isn't anything else in the way of a variable setup. But every game will play out differently because of the choices you make. And you can have a strategy going into this game. You can say, I'm going to decide to build statues. But then if the other players start going on the statue space, you might want to change your mind. So yeah, a low amount of variability, but that isn't a problem for this game. I think the variability comes in that you can play this game multiple different ways. You can have different objectives that you can go for each time you play. Like one game I went for lots of boats, another game I decided to go for lots of statues, but you have to be aware of what all the other players are going to do. One game I managed to deliver to all 5 of the Harbour Master boats here because nobody else was doing it, so I decided to do that. You will change your approach depending on which game you play. So yeah, that's fine. And that is pretty much everything. I've probably forgotten a few things as normal, but I've hopefully captured the main things. If you like the kind of games I like, you're going to like this game. I think that goes without saying. I hope you found this video useful. And as I mentioned at the start, if you want to support me on Patreon, help support the channel, keep the channel going and help me make more videos like this, then yeah, please do so. But until next time, take care and thanks for watching. Gaming Rules is proudly sponsored by Game Toppers, upgrading your gaming experience. Visit GameToppersLLC.com.